Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Duke Nguyen Abrahamson. I am the Executive Director of the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce. In recognition of the 20th anniversary, the Asian Leadership Panel, brought to you by PNC, is part of a month-long celebration during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, May 2021. During this month, we celebrate our 20 years of facilitating business relationships among Asian-owned and US-based companies and promote the economic advancement of the Asian American Pacific Islander. Businesses owned by Asian Americans from China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, India, among other countries, Fortune 500 companies, entrepreneurs, cultural organizations and associations, and political and government dignitaries have supported APAC throughout the years and are reason for our success. I want to thank DTE for their continued support of APAC as a signature sponsor throughout the years, and Denso and Ford Motor Company as our diamond sponsors this year. Thank you to PNC Bank for making this leadership panel possible. Please visit us online at apac.net. That's apacc.net for other ways to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month. Sarah from PNC will be introducing the panelists. I apologize, but Dr. Verinder Modgil was pulled away last minute and unable to join us for this discussion. Sarah, it's all yours.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Pobosic. I'm the market leader for commercial banking in Southeast Michigan for PNC Financial Services Group. On behalf of PNC, I would like to extend my congratulations on the 20th anniversary of APAC and join you in celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We are pleased to sponsor APAC and this presentation on Asian leadership. Now I'd like to introduce this fantastic panel of leaders. Moderating today will be Dr. Jamie Hsu. Dr. Hsu is executive in residence at Lawrence Tech, specializing in strategic management, leadership development, automotive technology management, innovation, and global collaboration. Prior to his current role, he served as executive director of global technology management, R&D centers, and advanced manufacturing centers at General Motors. Dr. Hsu earned his PhD in solid mechanics and has a bachelor's in civil engineering. Kim Dabbs is Global Director of Social Innovation at Steelcase. She is a social entrepreneur, advocate, and innovator. Her prior work is in arts and technology education and workforce development. Kim holds a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Michigan and a Bachelor's of Science in Art History from Kendall College of Art and Design. Alina Noor is Director of Political Security Affairs and Deputy Director of the Washington, D.C. office at the Asia Society Policy Institute. A native of Malaysia, Alina's work focuses on security developments in Southeast Asia, global governance and technology, and preventing countering violent extremism. Alina read law at Oxford University with degrees in public international law and security studies. And last but not least, Senator Stephanie Chang. She is the first Asian American woman to be elected to the Michigan legislature, worked as a community organizer in Detroit for nearly a decade before serving 2 terms in the Michigan House of Representatives. Senator Chang earned her bachelor's degree in psychology and master's degrees in public policy and social work from the University of Michigan. Dr. Hsu, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, okay. Make sure my microphone, everything, yeah. what a wonderful group of leaders we have here. I'm so impressed hearing their resume, what they have accomplished. Right? My role today is relatively simple, really to get the conversation started to talk about leadership of Asian Americans. Before I do that, I pose the first question, just to do some statistics for you. 50% of Asian Americans have college degree, versus in the average about 30%. Asian Americans have 6% of the population, but we have 0.5% of the people in a leadership position in corporate America. NIH recently contributed a lot to the COVID-19 and the medical field. Scientists, there are 20% Asian Americans in NIH, National Institute of Health, but less than 5% people have the leadership role. Okay? So you can see that Asian American is doing well in terms of making contributions, but not necessarily get recognized, rewarded by the leadership position. So today we'd like to explore that a little bit more and try to learn that, why is that and how to overcome that, so that we don't have to be restrained or constrained by the bamboo ceiling or constrained by the sticky floor. Okay, we are faced with that all the time. My goal in life, I've been in US for more than 50 years. I've heard Asian American be described as model minority. Then I also heard people describe us as a silent minority or invisible minority. And now I hear people talk about we hated minority. That's really very sad. So I hope somehow, we can find a way so we become a valued minority or a loved minority. I hope today's conversation is a great start toward that path. Okay. So with that, I'm going to ask some questions and ask our distinguished panelists to chime in to talk about what they view. Okay. The first question is, we attended so many leadership seminars, conferences, discussions. In your mind, what is leadership? What is a leader? Any one of you can comment so that we have common framework to discuss the future of the other questions. But first, what do you consider to be a leader? Stephanie, ready?
Sure. Thanks so much to APAC for having me on for this event, and happy Asian American Pacific Islander American. I said American twice. It's, the acronym changed. Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And just really an honor to be with all of you and excited to meet the other panelists today virtually. For me, I think, there's a lot of different kinds of leadership. For the work that I do, I think about public service leadership, and the way that I think of leadership is really in leading in a way that is rooted in what our communities want and what those that we are serving or leading need, what they need. And so I actually think that some of the most important qualities and components of leadership is listening and being able to help facilitate towards problem solving. So I don't know if that was vague enough, but for me, those are a couple things that I think of when I think of leadership is public servant sort of model, listening, and problem solving. I'm in the legislature, we each have staff, but very, very small staff. So it's a different kind of leadership in that I have over 250,000 residents that I am, answer to, that are my bosses. And so it's sort of like leadership in a way that's sort of not a normal, but so it's just such an amazing honor to be able to do this work. And so for me, again, leadership really goes back to thinking about ourselves as public servants and really trying to be responsible to what the people need us to do.
Okay. Thank you. Kim, how is it different in corporate world?
I think a lot of it's the same. My role at Steelcase, I lead social innovation. So the majority of my work really is about supporting our communities where we live and work throughout the world. And the first thing that we always think about is uniting in that purpose and making sure that we're coming together as a global community and supporting each other along the way. So when I think about being values driven or really being accountable to the people that we serve, at the end of the day, those are our neighbors, those are our friends, those are our team members. And we really put that first and foremost. And uniting in purpose is really important. And, when I think about it through a leadership lens, it's also creating clarity and understanding how we communicate our goals, how we communicate with each other. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're leading with empathy and we're listening first to understand. And if we can do that, we know that we're going to cultivate resilience, not only within each of us individually, which is incredibly important, but we're going to start to build resilient communities, resilient cities, resilient countries, resilient, global communities. And I think that's all rooted in this common purpose around connection and understanding.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Alina?
Yeah, I'm going to vehemently agree with everything that's said. I think for me, leadership is the ability to bring together different sets of people with different backgrounds, experiences, personalities, opinions, but also to be able to bring out the best in each and every one of those individuals in order to work together for a common cause. And I would also echo what has been said about listening. And critical to leadership is the ability to listen and to hear, right? Sometimes it goes in one ear and out the other, but the ability to retain what you hear is also really important in order for you to, as I said, bring out the best in each and every person so that we can all achieve a common goal.
Okay. Well, thank you. There seems to be a lot of common trait you talking about as leaders. I'm going to ask a probing question. Can you spot a leader? That you say, that's a leader. How would you spot a leader? In company, in public places, whatever. Asian Americans normally don't be viewed as a leader. So how would you spot a leader?
This is something I think about a lot because, I'm everywhere, anywhere I am, I'm on the lookout for like women and especially women of color who I think, that I want to encourage to run for office or that I can tell have like this amazing leadership experience already and maybe just need a little nudge because we need more of us. And I'm sure we'll talk about, probably we'll talk about that later. But, when I'm watching someone and observing, what are they doing? How are they serving? A lot of times I think of women who are juggling so much as a mom and helping people in their community and doing all of these things and not even necessarily thinking of themselves as a leader, but are just doing all of the things that really already make them an amazing leader. And so for me, I think sometimes spotting a leader, I think is is not necessarily always so obvious, but I think that for me, I think it's looking for people who are really knowledgeable about what's going on, stepping up in a way to try to solve problems, and oftentimes not even necessarily trying to get credit or publicity or anything, but that with a little nudge can maybe step up into the next big, role that they can play. So I love the question of how do you spot a leader? I'm going to keep thinking about that one too.
Okay, yeah. Kim, how do you spot a leader in Steelcase?
So when I think of leadership, a lot of times people think if you're leading a team or if you're leading a department, when we talk about leadership, often we talk about it in three different ways. One, you can be an individual and be a thought leader. Like, what does that look like? How do you lead with your ideas? And that's how movements are built. And when I think of the team leadership, really understanding those leaders that are actually, we talk about it as a leader as a gardener, really encouraging and cultivating the skills and the resilience of their teams. But I think one of the most important things when I look at someone and I'm like, you are a leader and I aspire to be like you and I aspire to be with you and your movement and your ideas, is when someone's trying to lead culture, which is one of the hardest things to start to shape and hold and steward in a community, in an organization. But those are the leaders that really have to be so fundamentally rooted in values, to be community driven, to make sure that the people that they're serving are always heard and listened to.
Okay, thank you. Elena, you have something to add?
Yeah, so I would actually go with sensing a leader. How do you sense a leader? For me, when you said spot a leader, I'm like, well, you can spot leaders because sometimes leaders assert themselves all the time, and they're asserting their leadership, but they're not necessarily attracting a willing followership all the time. And particularly in my industry, in national security, everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to speak loudly and assert who they are at the front of the pack. And sometimes the leaders are the ones at the back who inspire in very quiet ways. And so for me, it's more of sensing that leadership rather than spotting a leadership, because sometimes what is obviously in front of you is not always what you want or what you need.
Okay, thank you for your insight. One
Jamie,
of the reasons
Jamie, can I chime in?
I know you try to chime in.
I just want to chime in here because I am always looking for leaders. I am always looking for the Asian leaders. And somebody told me one time, anybody can say that they are a leader. And they're like, walk this way, follow me. And then you turn around and there's no one following you. You're not a leader. So for me, what I look for when I'm looking for Asian leaders, I'm looking for who's following you. I'm looking for who's listening to you. I'm also looking for, someone said about being a thought leader. Who is repeating what you've said? Who is looking up to you? I'm looking for your followers. And when I spot enough followers that I'm like, wow, people are looking up to this person, I need to look into them. I need to know why. And that's what I look for. And, I think it's a little bit, those are established leaders already, but then there are those that aren't established leaders that have loud voices, that are giving voices to those that don't have loud voices. I see them too, and I start to follow them. And then when people are like, oh, who are you following? I'm like, oh, here's all these leaders that I'm following. Let me introduce you.
Sure.
So I'm constantly looking for leaders, especially Asian leaders out there. And if you are an Asian leader, or if you know of Asian leadership out there that you want to introduce me to, or that you want to boast about, please add it to the live chat and let us know. I want to know who these people are.
Thank you. Those are all very good descriptions of leaders or what they're looking for. Then the question is, what's lacking by Asian Americans? Why they are not being recognized as leaders? Why are not being perceived as leaders? If you read a lot of people's resume, they all look like leaders, but you don't hear people to say, here comes a leader. Why?
Yeah. One of the actually hearing all of you talk makes me think of, I'm like going back into like high school now of like, so growing up, I was pretty shy. I was like quiet. I'm sometimes kind of quiet. I mean, I don't know, not always, but I mean, obviously the role that I am in doesn't allow me to be quiet. So, but I, it's interesting because I don't think I really thought of myself as a leader. And I think that probably a lot of Asian American young people don't think of themselves as a leader until there's someone who, like you said, spot, or as Alina says, senses something in that person. And for me, it was having a teacher, Richard Mui, who was a teacher at my high school. I think the only Asian American teacher who was like, be part of this club. Here's a book you should read about Asian American history, and like putting, encouraging me to be on the board. And then, just like, just kind of that type of mentorship, I think was really key. And honestly, like without that, I probably would be a totally different person. So I think there is this piece around really having a strong sense of identity that I think is key, I think, to a lot of us as Asian American leaders, because that sometimes takes some time to grow into. And I think part of that is that we don't necessarily, like growing up, I didn't have really Asian American leaders in the public sphere to look to. And like, just I'd never thought of myself in that way. It just wasn't there in my brain at all until someone was like, hey, you should do this. You should think about this. You should read this. And so I feel like that encouragement and that nudging and growing a sense of like a strong sense of identity is really critical, I think, especially for our Asian American young people who I think, especially in the Midwest, may not necessarily be learning their history, learning the things that are going on, unless someone's there for them.
Okay, thank you. Kim, in your company, do you have the so-called high pot list? If it's not confidential.
A what list?
High potential list for people.
High potential. So I'm not in HR,
Right.
but I'm sure they have like talent pipelines identified. You talk about identity, and there's so much in that identity piece. I felt like growing up, the world was made of places I didn't belong. And as an Asian American adoptee that was born in Korea, who currently lives in Germany, all of these experiences shape that identity. And when we think, I almost would reframe your question. I don't think there's anything wrong with our Asian youth, with the talents that they have, because we've heard how incredibly talented our Asian community is. But I think it's the systems at play. Representation matters, as we heard. We're not seeing Asian leaders because you can't become what you can't see. And I think it's really important, if you have power, to be able to share that power and be visible in a way that inspires the next generation. And then start working on those systems of exclusion that some people see and some people don't. And these are policies and practices that can start to mitigate or reduce bias from our own systems, and be really intentional to make sure that pathway is available, and we're creating communities of belonging for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Alina, in your field, you're in the security field, right? Or used to be.
Yeah, I still am.
Okay. In that field, how do you define a leader? Is that a leader is somebody can really solve tough problems? Because in security, you don't get visibility. You don't go out, do a lot of PR, marketing, right? You keep a low profile.
Well, it depends what part of security you're working, right? There are some, if you go on Twitter, I mean, everybody is so loud on Twitter. It gets really overwhelming sometimes. And that was what I was talking about. how do you define a leader? Is it someone who is like constantly yelling out what their position is, or is it someone who quietly makes things happen? And, just to get back to your questions, Jamie, I think if we zoom back a little or zoom out a little and we ask ourselves, well, what is the environment in which Asian Americans are operating in? Or who are we aspiring to be like in terms of leaders? Who are the models that we have as leaders? Do we want to aspire to be like them, or do we have our own identity, as Kim was talking about, to recast as leaders? And, I was born and raised in Malaysia. So for me, my identity is very rooted in my Malaysianness. And I grew up with all sorts of Asians in leadership positions. So I don't have quite the same questions about identity that maybe Kim does. But I also, because Malaysia is a fairly young post-colonial nation, have been asking myself a lot of questions about what colonialism has done in terms of how we think about what leadership means and who we want our leaders to look like. And so I think it's important to have this context in mind as we think about what kinds of leaders we want to be and how we want to inspire the next generation of Asian American leaders to be in this country in particular.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I read all your resumes. It's so impressive. You have all accomplished a lot and also not afraid to take on new things. Each one of you seem to be moving around, doing different things, totally different, not related stuff. I wonder how you achieve leadership, each one of you individually. Do you have a moment said, I will be a leader, or you kind of evolve into it, or you're being inspired by somebody, or being motivated by something? Is there some particular events or some people who influence you to make you so successful? Maybe you can share some of your personal experience with us all. Okay. Maybe we start with you this time, Alina.
Sure. I think like Stephanie, I never really thought consciously about wanting to become a leader. And I was given a lot of support by people around me, by the leaders in my organization. They really helped nudge me to think about these roles that I just kind of, subconsciously went into and took on as challenges. My favorite story to tell is so I work in the security realm, and in my previous position in Malaysia, I would provide briefings on security and defense issues. And one day, one of my bosses, who is a man, said, "Hey, I think you should give this briefing to a delegation of men from let's just say a very paternalistic and sometimes chauvinistic country." And, they were all men in uniform. I walked in. I was the only woman, visibly younger than them, obviously not in uniform. And there I was supposed to give them this briefing on security and defense issues. And you could tell that they were surprised, but they were also very diplomatic and polite. And so they just kept whatever they were thinking to themselves. But had it not been for my boss, who had almost, I think, put me up as a kind of a joke. Of course, he had faith in me, but he thought it would be amusing as well to have me provide that briefing. I probably would not have done it. And so there were many instances like that episode, which kind of pushed me along my career path to where I am today.
Okay, thank you. It looks like a mentor is kind of very important for everybody, right? Yeah. Kim, how about your personal experience, your story?
Yeah, I think everyone has a story of a mentor that's been transformational on their journey. I've had several, and it's been such a gift. Every time they come into my life, and every time they open up a door or give me an opportunity by sharing their power and by sharing their networks. And I think it's one of those things that each of us as leaders have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing the same for that next generation that absolutely deserves the same opportunities and deserves the same access. So often we live in a time where it's really hard to be authentic and to be real. And I think when I think of all of my mentors and all of those experiences, one of the things that they help instill in me is that resilience around being who I am, and finding places and finding positions in my career that allow me to bring my authentic self to work. And I think that's so key and critical to finding those safe spaces where you belong. And definitely the role of a good mentor to be able to help cultivate that resilience and authenticity.
Okay. Any particular events you remember?
So I was leading a nonprofit organization called the West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology. It's based in West Michigan. It was founded by Steelcase, who I currently work for, but I was their executive director at the time. And I remember sitting and talking to Jim Hackett, who is the CEO then of Steelcase, and he went on to become the CEO of Ford. But he would make time just to have a monthly meeting to talk about methods and mindsets of innovation, knowing that his time and that social capital of those networks that he provided actually was a bigger contribution or a bigger donation than anything he could have done. Because that started changing the way that we operated, changing the way we looked at community leadership and the role that our mission had in the greater world. So taking those opportunities to really get deeply know and cultivate not only the relationship and opening up doors, but to really see the possibility and potential of what new innovation, what new insights could happen if you could really step into your new ideas and power.
Okay. Yeah, your job is very unique. You know, I read that. I wonder, is that a company job or it's a community job?
It's both.
Social innovation, very unique.
Yeah. It's one of these. It is a corporate job. It is within the community, but I think every person in a company needs to be committed to the community as part of their job as well. So I've just been fortunate to be in a company where this is key and core to the mission of our organization, and we embed it in everything we do.
Okay.
Jamie,
yeah. So yes.
Can I ask a follow-up question? All of you guys have talked about mentors and how they have affected you or helped you along your leadership path. Can you guys give advice to the straight white man that is in that CEO position, that is in that leadership position? How can they be mentors and open up that mentorship to an Asian potential leader?
You want me to answer it?
Yes, please. Anybody, please. And Jamie, please, you too.
We'll wait until Stephanie gets a chance, but I used to teach mentorship and mentees. I said, mentor is like dating game. You don't know who you should date. You don't meet the first person and say, you are my mentor, you are my date. No, you just go out, meet a lot of people. The chemistries will work, the person's liking or what they want to do, you want to do, it matches. You have to do that. It's just like going to a bar, doing some dating game, and then you finally find one can help you out.
But let's say
that's a very technical reply.
Let's say that you are that white, straight CEO, that board member or that leader in that position, and you are the majority, and you sense a leader, and they happen to be Asian. How can give advice to the CEO, this white straight man, give him advice on how to be the best mentor towards somebody that is lacks representation? That, you know, for example, I'm this white straight man. I see you as this leader. We have this chemistry, dating, mentor chemistry, but what do you need from me as a white straight man? How do I help you? How do I provide mentorship for you? How do I show that I might not represent you, but I want you in these leadership roles? How can I help you?
I think there's a couple of things that you can do. You know, when I think about how many different mentors I've had throughout my life, one thing is making time, right? And if you're going to make time, and I know I keep coming back to this, but you really need to see the person that you're mentoring. You need to listen deeply and authentically see the gifts that they're bringing, and then understand what are the doors I can open to make sure that gift is seen by the world. And I think that's the greatest gift any mentor can do. If you're that CEO that you're describing with that identity, the greatest thing that they can do for that leader is actually shape the policies and practices within their hands, in their own organizations, to make sure they're doing it not just for one person, but for everyone. And I think that policy approach, to make sure that it's systemic, to make sure that they're removing bias from systems, is going to be critical, not only for that one leader, but for all leaders coming in that pipeline.
Right. Stephanie, you must have a lot of experience in mentoring or being mentee in the political world.
So I had to spend a couple of minutes processing this question, because most of my mentors have all been women, and most of them women of color. And so, I had to really think about your question, and I'm still thinking about it. But I would say that I think what Kim said really resonates with me, in being able to invest the time and seeing the person for who they are, and helping, identify what the gifts are. I also think, one of the things that probably is important is for the white straight men out there looking to mentor someone, to also know what boundaries there are on your knowledge of what the person's experience may be, and to also know that there might be times probably to appropriately bring in someone who is a woman, or who is a woman of color, because there are just things that if you're a white straight man, you won't have experienced certain things that women and women of color have experienced. And so I think sometimes, as part of mentorship, it is really important to have someone who may have experienced sexism in the workplace, or been passed over for things, or know what it feels like to experience certain situations and different microaggressions and things like that. And those are things where generally, white straight men won't experience that. And so I think it is important for mentors in that role to recognize their own limitations too. And to sort of, like Kim said, open up doors, and also figure out what are the other resources that you can bring in. And I also think probably one thing that's really important is to, one thing that I actually really always appreciate, and what I actually try to do for those who reach out to my office who are interested in just seeing what my job is like, or trying to is actually now during COVID, we don't have people shadow us at the Capitol, because social distancing and everything, but normally I'm a big fan of shadow days, because I think that is one of the things that can be so helpful for people to literally see what a day in your life is like in that position, so they can get a sense of what it looks like. Obviously, this is not really possible right now, but hopefully soon, post-COVID, if there is such a thing, we will be able to resume those kinds of shadow days, because I love it. I think it's really impactful. I know that when I've shadowed people, it really helps to crystallize, okay, this is something that maybe I could do. I remember when I was considering running for office, because people had asked me to think about running, I had just all these questions. Then when I shadowed Rashida Tlaib, who was my state rep at the time, now a member of Congress, I was like, oh, okay, I think I could do this, And so sometimes to actually physically see this is how it works, I think is really, really powerful.
One of the things, Duke, you asked, right, if how you approach a white CEO and ask him or her to mentor you, right? I would say it's value proposition. You should tell them that by mentoring you, how much value they're going to get. For example, at GM, I actually did that. I told them, my boss's boss, I said, I understand Eastern culture. I will explain to you why Toyota is doing certain things certain way. You will never think about from a Western view. I actually gave him example and show them the difference. He said, wow, never thought about that. So it's had to have a value proposition rather than say, do me some good, mentor me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love what you said in regards to showing them their limitation, just like what Stephanie said in regards to that white, straight CEO, knowing
Right.
what his limitations are. And knowing that you don't have the answers to everything, that you do not know everything. And the more diverse your room is,
Mm-hmm.
the more ideas that are going to come out.
Right.
I read somewhere that your imagination is only as good as your experiences. So what you imagine, you've somehow experienced it, read it, saw it, watched it happen. And if you don't have a diverse room with multiple different imaginations and experiences, you're not going to have every idea available to you, every option available to you, every opportunity available to you, because you're limiting yourself to only the people that are like you, that have experienced the things that you do. And oftentimes, if we go back, Jamie, to your dating analogy in regards to mentor, you are going to mentor somebody that you see yourself in, or you're going to want somebody to mentor you if you have some similarities. Maybe try to find those people that you don't have similarities with and ask them to mentor you. That way, that opportunity for you to grow as a minority and for them to grow as the mentor as well.
Well, be careful. I may not agree that mentor have looked for somebody have similar interests, similar. Maybe you want the opposite. It's really a value proposition. What do you want to learn? What you're lacking? Why do you need? For example, when I pick for mentors, I know that I don't know how to do public imaging. I know it's very important. So I pick people to tell me what's my image to them. I don't ask them for technical help, whatever. So anyway, I'm going to ask another question. We've been told that Asian Americans are relatively humble. Most of the time, we're very humble. We're low key. We bury our head and do things. We don't brag about what we do, right? So I'm going to change that perception and ask the three of you, or even four of you, to brag about yourself. What makes you really stand out when you compare with your peers, either in the legislators or in the corporate office or in the community? What makes you stand out? Please brag.
Can I start?
No, you cannot brag.
I feel that I have a hard time doing this.
That's
because
right.
Because growing up, everything I did to try to fit in. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood.
Right.
All of the Asians in that neighborhood were my family. Everything that I did, if I heard racist remarks, or if I was made fun of because of the food that I ate or the way that I looked, I was told by my family to put your head down, ignore them, and work hard and prove yourself. Work hard and prove yourself. But then what you do is that you fade in the background. You become the invisible minority,
right.
Like you said. So I think that's why, for me personally, that's why it's difficult for me to brag about myself, because then it puts me in that role where people will see me, that I'm more visible. and I am more comfortable in the role of putting somebody else in the spotlight. When somebody comes to me and they ask me questions, I'm like, oh, I've got the perfect Asian leader to do that. So I'm going to put somebody else in that role and do that.
Today we have special leaders here. So I want all the audience to see that how leaders knows how to brag about themselves. Stephanie, you started. Brag yourself. What makes you stand out compared to all the representatives, senators?
As someone who's had to campaign 3 times and, successfully, ran for office, I actually what Duke said really resonates with me because oh my gosh, like you would not imagine. Okay. My first campaign in 2014, it was like so hard to figure out what to say about myself. I like cried all the time. I was like, I don't know. Coming up with a tagline for my campaign for some reason was like the hardest thing. And like, oh my gosh, it was just so much self-reflection and having to like have other people tell me what to say. Cause I was like, I don't know. I just had trouble figuring out how to talk about myself because I think you're right that there is this element of humility, and so it didn't come naturally. Although now I have to do it right in order to keep my job. So I will say. So one thing that I think does stand out about me is that I think sort of sets me apart. Yes. Okay. I'm supposed to just brag and not add all the clauses. So I'm fiercely progressive in my values. And at the same time have also been really good at being able to work across the aisle and get bipartisan things done. And I think that is a rare thing these days. You either have one or the other, and it's not as common to have people who can be someone pushing towards the left and also able to work with people and work on problem solving and figuring out the bipartisan solutions. And I also think that one thing that stands out is that I am someone who I am not at all afraid of a challenge, and I have taken votes that have got me into trouble because, I will stand up for what I believe in, no matter what the consequences may be. And, that's a tough thing to do sometimes in this kind of job. So I think those are a couple of things that I'm proud of and set me apart.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's why you are so successful in the Progressive Caucus, so influential. Right? Kim, how about you? What makes you stand out among your peers?
Good question. I think for me, in all of my jobs across all of the years, it's less about my accomplishments and it's more about my guiding principles that I'm proud of. I'm fiercely authentic. I believe that I need to be real and I need to be real to myself first. I fail at it often, but it's something that I hold really tight, and it's always something that I think about. I act with bravery every single day. And every single day I have to speak truth to power around the world in multiple communities. And I think it's really important to do that. And when I say things, I mean it. And that's one of these things that's really hard. And a lot of people think this is in conflict of leadership, but it's not. The more authentic you are to yourself, the more that you're able to speak your truth and act with bravery, you're gonna get it right. And I always come back to that Brene Brown quote, and it's almost my mantra every single day. I'm here to get it right, not to be right. And I tell that to myself in so many different meetings and so many different situations. And I try to remind that to my teams and to the community that I serve as well. So my guiding principles are, I think, what I'm most proud of.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Alina?
Yeah, so Duke, I completely understand. This is really difficult for me. And in fact, not to crap on what everybody else has said, but for me, I think bragging is a bit antithetical to leadership in a way, because I didn't grow up with that striving to be setting yourself apart from the whole community. So I guess I have that mental barrier in my head to bragging about my achievements. But I find myself being in DC and in the setting that we are now with the US-China competition, and me not being American or Chinese, I have a very different view of this whole idea of competition. And so I think the independence of thought and mind that I hold is something that sets me apart in the DC scene right now. I would say independence of speech, but I find myself having to self-censor more and more these days, unfortunately, because the climate simply does not allow me to speak my truth to power, or I could possibly get into trouble. So I think like having this independence in my position on a matter of such high prominence right now is something that I can be proud of.
Okay, yeah. As leader, excuse me, as leaders, everyone have to deal with a lot of things. Every day is different things. What are some of the so-called joyful things or very painful things you have to do as leader? So when people want to get into leadership position, they need to know both the positive and the negative side of it, right? What would you say the most gut-wrenching things a leader has to do?
I'm going to go with the joys, not the challenges. Would be, I could talk a lot about that too, but I will say in terms of the joy, one of the things that I love so much is seeing people that have interned for me or worked for me go on to just do already doing amazing things when they are on Team Chang, but then once they sort of like move on, to see them even further develop and do even more amazing things. And I've only been in office for 6 years, but many of the people who used to work for me or were on my team are just doing so many amazing things. And so that is one of the things that brings me a lot of joy, is knowing that hopefully something that they got out of being on my team hopefully helped in some way, but in some ways maybe even just added on to the skills and knowledge and experience that they already had, to be able to grow even more and do even more, to be able to help to contribute to the community. So thinking about and many of these people are, like I mentioned, already had these skills and experience, but just giving them a little bit extra something. I hope that just brings me a lot of joy, is seeing people grow and develop.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Kim?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same. The things that bring me the most joy is when we know we've been successful and people have pathways to opportunity by the partnerships that we've created in the community. When people feel connected to purpose, our employees feel connected to purpose and the programs that we deliver. And we're always incredibly proud when we see progress and those cultures of belonging. I think some of the hardest things that we have as leaders is one of the roles as leaders is making choices. And it's really difficult to make choices. And in the social impact work or the social innovation work, when you're trying to do things like solve for the sustainable development goals, the UN global goals of poverty or education or equity, I think one of the hardest things is this is forever work. It's never going to be enough. And we have to understand that we can do what we can in our lifetime with the hours that we have and the jobs that we have and the positions that we have. But this truly is forever work. And it's going to take all of us making really good choices in across different sectors to make progress on those goals. And to see us not making progress as fast as we could is always a tough one.
Yeah, making choices is always tough, right? Yeah, okay. Alina?
Yeah, I share, the same joys that Stephanie and Kim have talked about, but I think some of the hardest things have been watching some of my mentees feel unhappy because of decisions that have been taken much higher up that have been beyond my control. And so that's been particularly hard because I want them to enjoy the work, I want them to thrive. But if there are incidents where something is beyond my control or a decision is taken much higher up and it affects them negatively, then I feel really, really bad about it.
Duke, you are the community leaders. Any joy or painful experience you have, or they are only joys?
I am a very passionate person, so I feel the highs very high and I feel the lows very lows. I think that a lot of the joys I will have to echo everyone here, but I also want to add, I feel that sometimes the joys are just being grateful. I used to do this when I had to drive to work. Somebody asked me one time that, or told me, if you were only had tomorrow, what you are grateful today, tomorrow. So what you have tomorrow is only what you are grateful for today. What would you have? And so that scared me. So every day when I would drive to work, I would think about everything that I'm grateful for so that I will have it the next day. And then you start thinking about all the big things, but then you also start thinking about all the small things. Like, I am so glad that I have a car full of gas, that I don't have to stop at the gas station because I'm 5 minutes late. And then you start being happier because of all of these little things. What pains me is what's out of my control. What pains me is what I've seen a lot of in the news, and what we've been experiencing for a long time now, that just happens to be in the mainstream news now. I think that a lot of us saw it coming in regards to Asian hate crimes. We saw it coming last year. We knew that it was going to come. We felt it. It pains me that my mom is in San Jose, and I'm scared that if she goes grocery shopping, somebody's going to attack her because she's a senior citizen and she's Asian, and she's walking around the streets of San Jose, and there's nothing I can do about it. As much as I talk about it, as much as I advocate, and as much as I try to educate, there's a lot of things that are out of my control. And unfortunately, I feel that pain. I feel like I wish I could do more. I wish there was more that I could do. I wish that, the things that I said, somebody is actually listening, that they're taking it to heart, that they can see it and they can feel it, and that they're going to advocate along with me.
It is true, all on the shoulders of leaders, there's always more stuff on your shoulder. So you can feel the weight and the pain more than ordinary people. So I appreciate that. I thank you all to be leaders. I'm going to give each one of you 3 to 5 minutes to give a presentation to all the people here. What would be your advice to them to become a leader? You can give a 3 minutes or 5 minutes talk. The floor is yours. Who want to go first? People waiting, applauding, want to listen to your advice, how to become a leader, Asian American leader. Okay.
I'll kick it off. My advice
I'm
is,
going to time you.
I'm not going to take the whole 3 minutes. I promise you, I'm not going to take the whole 3 minutes. I think my advice is go do it. Just be that person, be that hero, be that person that I'm going to look up to. Be that representation, see that there's that lack, and be that person that you wanted, be that change that you want to see. Be that person, be that mentor, take that opportunity to brag about yourself, take that opportunity to be visible, and do that so that not just the next generation, but this generation. I want to see it. I'm 46 years old. I'm not waiting for I don't want the next generation to see it. I want me to see it. I want to see it. So I want you to be that leader. Just do it. If you feel the inclination, if you feel that, hey, I'm good at this, I'm going to move up. I'm going to do this. Do it. Do it. Take that. It might take 10 years, but in 10 years, you're going to be that leader. My brother, it took him 20 years to get his bachelor's degree. It took him 20 years. Life happens. Life happens along the way. Things happen along the way. And he struggled and he worked, but he continued to work at it. And now, after 20 years, he's got a college degree. So if he never started, or if he didn't continue to fight for it, he would not have it now. He would not have it today. So take that first step and let it take 10 years. But at least you're going to get there. If it takes 5 years, if it takes 10 years, if it takes 20 years, whatever it takes, you're going to be that leader. So take that first step.
Thank you. Stephanie.
So I'll answer this in the framing of running for office, because that's what I get asked a lot. I would say for people who are engaged in the community and doing, the things that they need to do to serve the need, and help solve problems in your neighborhood, in your block club, all of those things, is to find ways to get even more involved, to find ways to figure out what are some of the issues you're most passionate about, and find ways to get active on them, find ways to talk to other people about what they're passionate about. And I get asked a lot, like, well, what's the right path to run for office one day? Like, there's no one right path. So that's why I have sort of this generic, like, get involved, find what you're passionate about, do those things, and just keep growing, keep doing the things that you care about, and finding ways to connect with people. And I also think, seeking out a mentor if you don't already have one or two or three, to figure out, who are the people that you see what they're doing and you really want to learn more, and reach out to them, and to try to also stretch outside your comfort zone, because I think sometimes we put ourselves in a box of like what we think we're capable of, or what we are most comfortable with, and trying to just sort of like push out of that a little bit, and figure out like, what is the thing that I could do that maybe I had never thought about before, and to again, just sort of like seek out what are the things that you are so passionate about that you want to be engaged on, and just go for it. So and as far as running for office, I would reiterate what I said earlier of just that it's so important that we get more people who have never thought about running for office to be the ones who run, to serve the community, because oftentimes it's those people that don't ever run until 5 to 10 people try to push them towards that, and we do need more people who are really, really just rooted in what's going on in their community, and very rooted in their values, and not looking for a title, and just really committed to solving problems, and being an advocate. Those are the types of people that we need in these roles. So, and if people want to, you know, reach out with any specific questions about running, definitely feel free.
Okay, thank you. So it's important to find the fire in your gut. If you know what you really want and passionate about, then you can go for it, right? Okay. Kim?
I just so much of what both of you have already talked about. I think I would love for us to be in the same room together because I really want to meet all of you in person. When I talk to people about finding that, it's the same. You need to root yourself in purpose. No matter what field, no matter what sector, no matter what job, if you don't understand what that purpose is and why it connects to you as an individual, no matter how many different positions or what leadership position you have, you're never going to fulfill your own promise. So I think that's really key and critical. But before you understand what your purpose is, and I think you've heard this as a repeated theme tonight, is you need to know your identity and understand what is your lived identity. What are the pieces that you're claiming? What is the learned identity? What choices have you made? And then how can you actually take those moments and take your power and really share that with others in a meaningful way? So if I think about that, it's like, when is the last time you really shared your power? Like when you had something and you said, I can make this happen, or I can leverage my whatever on behalf of others. And then think about the time when you held your power and you didn't share it, and how is that showing up in your life? And as you think about those leadership moments and those choices that you make, as you start to get into those positions, always asking yourself, in this moment, am I holding power or am I sharing power? And I think it's critical that you know your identity so you can root it in that purpose. And once you have power, you have practiced throughout your entire career how to share that power. So when you're in a position of influence, and whether that be thought leadership or people leadership or sector leadership, you can build a stronger and resilient system, like holistic system with policies and practices and culture that impacts thousands and thousands of people's lives every day. And those are the things that you're really going to need to know and understand. And that's a great responsibility. So a lot of people think about, you talked about the joy and the pain piece, but I think somewhere in the middle lies that true, authentic responsibility of the weight of leadership, and understanding the butterfly effect of the choices that you make as a leader. And when you're designing things, when you're designing experiences, when you're crafting all of those choices, how are you making that human-centered? How are you putting people at every single decision-making moment in whatever you build, make, design? And that's going to be critical along those pathways. So I think the responsibility of leadership is all about going back to the beginning, knowing your identity, making sure that it can be authentic, rooting it in your purpose, and making sure that your guiding principles are the values that help you make those choices every day. So by the time you do get to that leadership position, you're making good decisions.
Okay, thank you, because you keep emphasizing authentic, right? And Stephanie also say that, you know, what you're passionate about, what you believe in about. There actually is a difference. I used to say that in the Eastern culture, Asian Americans, we always emphasize inside out, from inside out. And the Western culture tend to say outside in. Make sure you dress properly. Make sure you have the executive look first, and then you work inside. So it's kind of interesting. I look at the comparisons, you know, between Asian Americans and Westerns. So all three of you keep emphasizing that internally it's important. You're passionate, authentic, you hold to your true values, right? Okay, that I don't hear, if I talk to a different group of people. Okay. Alina?
Yeah, I'm just going to underscore that actually, because I'll try to reframe it in a slightly different way. I think it's really important to understand who you are and where you've come from in order to know where you're going. And sometimes we think we know because we assume that whatever we've learned along the way, we can have a PhD, we can be educated at the highest levels, and sometimes we think that's enough. But then once you start questioning structures around you, systems around you, you start to really you start to realize that sometimes what you've assumed you've known all along is not what it is or what it should be. And so for me as well, I've been unlearning a lot of things over the last few years. Knowledge that I assumed was correct and true, I've started to question a lot. And so I think it's really important to continue questioning, continue to be curious about everything around you, because if you aspire to leadership in the systems that are already in place, maybe that's sufficient for some, but certainly I think for minority populations such as Asian Americans, that's not enough. And so if you aspire to be a leader in the current structure, in the current system, possibly challenge yourself to do more, change the whole structure, change the whole system, because again, the knowledge that we've taken from outside in isn't always reflective of what's inside out that we want to manifest in reality.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned that, because some people mention the difference between leaders and managers. The managers work within the system. The leaders work on the system. That's a basic difference. So you just mentioned that, the systems view. Okay. Yeah, Rich. Okay. I have one more question to ask the four of you. And then afterwards, you can suggest any additional topic I didn't cover you want to talk about, okay? But let me ask the last question. This is a fun question. Suppose the state of Michigan suddenly decide to give APAC $10 million. Did you hear that, Duke? And said, please develop some program to enhance the leadership of Asian Americans. Give you $10 million. What should we do with the $10 million? Every one of you, think about it. To really develop the leadership capability of Asian Americans in Michigan. What should we do specifically? Okay. Stephanie, you must already have that. You know how to spend the money, right?
I have so many ideas about how we should spend the money. But I will say this is actually great timing, because I think you may all know that yesterday, there's a new group that was formed, the Asian American Foundation, $250 million with backing from influential executives and major companies across the country to invest in Asian American groups across the country. So I think we're going to have to really push to make sure Michigan is on the map for this new organization, because this is huge. It's never, this is huge. So, I mean, it's everyone from the Ford Foundation, the NBA, Bank of America, single largest philanthropic gift devoted to Asian Americans. And actually, this New York Times article is Jamie, you mentioned earlier, 6% of the population and a certain percentage of, this is actually a really interesting statistic, that Asian Americans, while we make up about 6% of the population, we receive less than 1% of philanthropic funding. Wow. And so, yeah, so this is actually a really timely question. One of the things I think is really needed, and this is sort of an indirect answer to your question, but I think it is definitely related, is and this group is actually going to be spending, I think, a considerable amount of effort focused on pushing for Asian American curriculum to be taught in our schools. And in a way, I think that is very much linked to thinking about leadership, thinking about my own journey. And again, learning the history, reading Helen Zia's book, Asian American Dreams, and becoming more proud of who I am, and getting a better sense of my identity. I think that really propelled me to figure out, well, this is what leadership can look like and how to be me. And so back in high school. And so I actually think that these efforts around Asian American curriculum is so important. And there's been, I feel like I've been in like 10 different conversations about this topic in the past 2 weeks, because I think that parents are starting to realize their kids are not learning any of this stuff in our schools. And they really should. They deserve to, my daughters, they're only 5 and 2, right? Almost 2 right now. But, when they get to that point, I hope that they are learning the history of the Asian Americans in schools. I mean, if not, I will obviously teach them, but it should be something that every student is learning. And so I would say that's a really critical, because I think that our kids deserve that. I also do think that, just in general, we have some amazing Asian American community organizations who are doing so much for the community, and are showing tremendous leadership, with, shoestring budgets and all volunteer boards, who are devoting 20 hours a week to making things happen, thinking about groups that, especially during this pandemic, completely voluntarily getting hundreds of thousands of face masks donated to vulnerable community members, getting care packages donated and delivered directly to senior buildings and other vulnerable community members. I mean, I think that we've just seen over the past year, not only, the rise in anti-Asian hate, but also tremendous contributions from the Asian American community. And these groups are doing it with hardly anything. And so I would say that in terms of investing in leadership, it has to include investing in Asian American community organizations that are on the ground, 1, providing direct service, but 2, also the groups like Rising Voices, like API Vote, like all the other, there's not too many of them, but the groups that are there that are mobilizing people, engaging people in the democratic process. And that is a huge part of making sure that our community, our voice is represented, that we see ourselves starting to be more, I guess, recognizable in leadership positions,
Right.
but with the goal of addressing problems in our community. So I don't know, that was sort of a circular answer, but basically I'm excited about this new organization. I hope that some of this money can come to Michigan, because we just have so many groups that are doing so many things with hardly any support. And I hope that we can really do more.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about. We have so many volunteers doing a lot of work. We should provide them with some help in terms of how to do things right, how to become leaders, right? So if they can all get this kind of training or boot camp training and knowledge, they become even more efficient, more valuable. Okay. Yeah, Kim and Lena, how would you do that with $10 million? What would you do?
So I have when those kind of investments come in, I've got a pretty firm belief that you have to build with community and not for community. So it would be one of these things to bring everyone together to say that you're actually working on the ground on these issues, bring those voices to the table, and how would you spend it? Because I think they know best. So I would get everyone together and have them design how to spend it.
Okay, yeah. Alina?
So I have not had the honor of even going to Michigan yet. So I feel a bit of a fraud talking about how this money should be spent in Michigan. But I generally agree. I think, sure, you have to get the community involved, but I also think education is really important. And understanding the history of the different Asian communities is something that can root future leaders very strongly to their past and their own philosophies, values, and cultures. Because so often we imbibe everything that is around us without necessarily questioning, again, where we've come from and how it is that we can continue to grow the traditions and values and philosophies that we ourselves are anchored in.
Great, yeah. You know, that's my personal dream. You know, I hope that somebody would give me the $10 million. I would love to run some summer camp every year for Asian Americans who want to learn, who want to practice leadership, so that we can grow everybody. You know, we've been talking about this here and there, but the real power is that everybody go through the same experience, same kind of training, and build a network. Then it become very powerful. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Jamie,
Okay.
I want to answer this question. I really do. And I'm going to try to answer this question in a out of the box thinking, but still within our conversations that we've had this evening.
Sure.
I feel that what I would love to do with this money is to work on the system. You know, you talked about educating the Asian leaders. I think we have a lot of educated Asian leaders. I think that what we need to do is go into those corporations and pave out a path for them and say that, hey, you know, and be an advocate for these Asian leaders within their own corporations and pave this path for them. I think that that's what we need to do. And I think that those corporations that are watching right now, that's what they need to do as well, is to see how that they can support us and pave that path for those Asian leaders that are within their company.
Yes, it has to be a collaborative effort. Okay, the communities, the individuals, the legislators, the government, and the companies do it together. Okay. Okay. I'm running out of my question now. I want to give some time to have some general chat and also even questions from the audience. But I really want to thank all the panelists. You know, I'm really impressed, not only by your achievement, but by your passion, okay, by your innovative ideas. It's really quite an honor and a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you so much. And I'm turning this back to Duke. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I know, Stephanie, that you wanted to talk about youth leadership programs.
Sorry, yeah, I don't know why I didn't know this wasn't like the first thing I said in response to the last question. Sorry, but it's just the way my mind works. And anyway, back to when Jamie, when you were talking about youth leadership programs, I don't know why I forgot to mention. So there's actually 2 Asian American youth leadership programs that I wanted to plug for anyone watching who's got who's either in high school or has a son, daughter, niece, nephew, you know, grandchild in high school in Michigan that's Asian American. There's a couple different groups that have Asian American youth leadership programs. So Rising Voices is currently accepting applications for their youth fellowship program, which will be this summer. And then also API Vote Michigan also has a youth leadership core. I was trying to look on their website. I can't tell if they are accepting applications yet or not for this year. But those are 2 programs that I think are really great. And, you know, those are programs where, you know, it will be awesome to sort of replicate these. And, you know, I think that these types of fellowship experiences can really stay with people for a long time. And, you know, I hope that if we did have that $10 million in Michigan, it would be great to direct some of that to those programs. But if you know anyone, definitely encourage them to apply.
Kim, Elena, do you guys have any final remarks that you guys want to share during this Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month?
No, just gratitude. Thank you so much for having me and this amazing panel. It's so nice to get to know each of you and have this conversation.
Likewise, I also want to echo my appreciation. And I also wish we were all in the same room together, just shooting the breeze and growing this conversation. I do hope this conversation grows. I hope more questions are asked and that people in our own community provide the answers themselves instead of hoping for the system to provide those answers for us.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to say thank you for celebrating AAPI Heritage Month with us. I want you to continue to celebrate throughout this whole entire month by supporting the Asian artists, by supporting the small Asian businesses, by learning more about Asian culture, and by standing up against Asian hate. So thank you on behalf of everybody here and APAC, and happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.